Molweni, and welcome to it right here on Cape Town TV. Of course, you are watching Conversations with Africa Unite, the show from Africa to Africans. Of course, I am your host, Lelethu, and every single week you'll be seeing more of my face because we will be bringing you the lowdown on all things migration, unpacking some of the most important conversations regarding migration. And please do not forget to join in on our conversations on all our social media platforms. We are Africa Unite on Facebook and Instagram, and on Twitter we are Africa_Unite_ZA. I'm very excited today because we get to speak to Ms. Sarah Moti, who is from the Action Support Center, and she will be helping us unpack some of the challenges that migrants face while living in South Africa. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us on the show, and welcome.
Thank you, Lelethu, and the viewers at home.
Thank you so much. Now, before we start, can you please unpack to us and let us know what kind of work that it is that you do at the Action Support Center, especially in relation to migrants?
Migration is our core business. We work with schools and community leaders to sensitize them on the importance of understanding the issue of diversity and migration. Note that it's conflicts that made people to move from their own countries, including corruption, post-independence, post-colonial invasions. If those countries have, gained their independence, the book continues to be run by Western powers in cahoots with their leaders. Hence, our work is around conflict transformation, but also when people are displaced and living in other countries as migrants, refugees, we therefore support in sensitizing both the local host communities as well as the migrants themselves. I'll use the word migrant, generic, referring to all those that have migrated from their own home countries to seek refugee or safety in other parts of the world or other countries.
All right, thank you so much, Sarah. And I think you touched on a few things there, but can you just please, just generally, and the most common of challenges that migrants face while in South Africa? And you did say some of the solutions that you've brought about, but please lay out now some of the most common challenges that are faced by migrants in the country.
So migrants come to an environment that already is flooded by their own internal issues. If you talk migration in South Africa, there is issues of service delivery, unemployment, and poverty, which largely are the issues that migrants who are also vulnerable face or encounter with their counterparts, which are already flooded, as I mentioned, with their own socioeconomic challenges. Therefore, it creates tensions and conflicts amongst migrants and the host communities. But there is the other picture, which people on the ground, on what we call grassroots, who are migrants and local communities, that they don't comprehend, that the tensions are not necessarily caused by them, but by the robbery, the corruption, the capital flight that happens between leaders themselves, who are using resources for their own residents, for their own citizens, invest them in abroad, in villas, invest them in their own interest. But these are resources that are looted in cahoots, as I mentioned, with the Western empires, that we believe that while we have gained independence or democracies, but we have not gained economic freedoms. The Western powers are still sitting on the neck of an African leader that quite often finds himself locked in such, powers. We're seeing what young people are now saying, for example, in West Africa and North Africa, They are already tired of that kind of an arrangement, and they are rising up to say, no, enough is enough. And it's not different from what is happening in South Africa. So African citizens have not been freed from the economic shackles of the Western empires. They are still directly affected by what is happening between their leaders and those agreements with the West that ties, the economic machinery not to trickle down to the citizens on the ground.
Thank you so much for that, Sarah. Now, before we go to the ad break, you mentioned very, very important points there that South Africa already has its internal struggles. And obviously, now having to house some migrants in the country, how does that then work? How does it affect migrants and the ways that they experience South Africa? So because South Africa is already experiencing some of these very, difficult situations with service delivery, with unemployment and all of that. So how does that then link to the challenges that are faced by migrants while living in South Africa?
The challenges faced by migrants are not different from the ones faced by locals, but they could be extended in a sense that they come into an environment that is so-called has scarce resources and therefore compete. So is that competition that intensifies the tensions that then culminate to what we normally call Afrophobia, where others are then attacking others who are perceived to be migrants. So that becomes the number one challenge, the Afrophobia. And then secondly, because already the resources of the broader South African vulnerable groups are limited, then there is tension in terms of, for example, access to schooling or education, access to housing, and access to work quite often. The issue of unemployment, for example, because in the past few years, we've seen the tension around employment, migrants be blamed for taking jobs. What we know, for example, in the spaza shop economy, that when migrants came to South Africa post 1994, those shops who were owned, markets were owned previously by South Africans, had been closed down because of this burgeoning culture of shopping malls that were immediately taking a business from the local. So these are some of the locals. So these are some of the challenges that migrants face, and then they become a scapegoat to a problem that is not created by them.
Okay, thank you so much, Sarah. Sarah's not going anywhere. We'll just be taking a quick ad break. But please do remember to join in on the conversations on our social media platforms. We are on Instagram. We are also on Facebook. It's Africa Unite. And we are also on Twitter, Africa_Unite_ZA. Please stay tuned. And welcome back to the show. You are still watching Conversations with Africa Unite, and this is the show from Africa to Africans. Now, if you missed us before the ad break, we are talking all things that are related to migration. We're speaking about the challenges that are faced by migrants in South Africa, and we still have Sarah Moti with us, and she has been unpacking all of those challenges. Now, Sarah, thank you once again for joining us. Before we went on the ad break, you touched a bit on scapegoating, and that has been being used by South African locals to sort of bring some sort of reasoning behind the challenges that we face. And you mentioned that these challenges are not as a result of migrants in the country, but rather as a result of internal issues that we are already facing. So can you please again unpack that for us, please, in the simplest form? How does that work? So how do people get to think that, this is because of a migrant? Where do these notions and stigmas come from?
The stigma comes from leaders who are unable to deliver services to their own people and deliver according to their own mandates. Take rural areas, for example, where you have thousands and thousands of graduates coming from the cities who are unemployed and there's no migrant living there. So what do you have to say about that? Talk about the fact that the narrative that has been pushed is about rural urban migration, as if rural areas cannot be developed, but it's a very stringent narrative, as you could see, that once people migrate from their own rural areas, somebody comes and then gets the land and build, a lodge or a golf course in the same land that is seen as not developed. So we should question this question. We should question this narrative of rural development and what does it mean, and the narrative behind that. We have provinces, for example, that have turned out are becoming so-called host provinces, like Northern Cape, where 60% of young people have migrated to the cities because of the name of unemployment. Yet somebody comes in the name of a corporate or business, will then start expropriating minerals that are there, which are minerals or resources people walking on top of. So we need to unpack this narrative of unemployment and what does it mean and who does it suit. It suits business for people to migrate from their communities, from their very large areas which are not polluted, which are very clean, and then move and get concentrated in one so-called urban area. In fact, the issue of farm or rural life is a new phenomenon. By 1895, we only had 5% of our world population living in cities. So when we talk about development, this development is skewed because it assumes that development will only happen in a certain area, which is termed urban, and not in the areas where our people are. But also it suits the corporates to then go and take over those economies. I mentioned underground minerals, which are in abundance in provinces such as the Northern Cape. So it's a dual, it's a plural narrative that when a marginalized person hears it, they feel that it's only in the urban area because that's what they've been presented with. Yet we know that land access is one of the wealth that our population currently needs and they are hungry for, and the use of that land. Because the question is that what are we going to do with the land? What are they doing with the land themselves?
So fundamentally, it is a government failure issue, you could say.
Well, it's documented. In fact, now it's no more a hidden secret that our governments collectively in Africa, not only in South Africa alone, have failed their own citizens. I'll give an example of Senegal, for example. 50% of young people in Senegal have migrated to where? France, because of what? The so-called lack of employment opportunities. Similarly, here we have we have a problem, huge issue of internal migration because of this narrative, which I'm saying, which is very skewed and plural and only suits those that want all of us to migrate in cities. And when we all, grouped here, then somebody takes over the land and we wake up more and more landless. As we are becoming more and more landless, we're seeing these developments happening, but they are happening not in the name of the ordinary marginalized, but in the name of some external company in cahoots or in collaboration with few elites.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Sarah. Now, please tell us more about the work that you do before we let you go, and how people can maybe get in touch with you, and sort of what you do as a solution to this issue and the challenges that are faced by migrants.
At a high level, I mentioned that we do sensitization, but to drill it down, we're setting up peace committees in communities that are able to take the message to their own constituencies. And those peace committees are not only made out of South Africans, they are sort of very inclusive and very diverse of all identities, as prescribed, for example, on Chapter 2 of the Constitution. So we are inclusive. We don't discriminate anyone to be part of that, peace committee structures that we're setting up. And from time to time, they go to hotspots, which we know, for example, other areas in our communities are hotspots of such attacks. They provide this type of sensitization and awareness in schools in their own communities. But sometimes at large, they target what we call community leaders, who include traditional leaders and faith-based or interfaith or institutions. And that has worked in instances where there's possible attacks. Then we are able to mitigate and give people credible education that make them aware that this is not a problem for only South Africa, but it's a regional program, and it's our leaders who are having a problem. In fact, Lelethu, for my last input, how can you then tell me that between 2014 and 2019, this country alone has lost 3 trillion rands? I mean, 3 trillion rands in corruption. How do you explain that? It's a number that even you and I cannot even put down. And how much could that amount have done? And other African leaders, they are not committed to bring change in their own citizens. So it's a collective African problem that the leaders need to wake up. Other than that, the youth is here, and they cannot be lied to anymore.
Thank you so much, Sarah. We could go on and on and on, but please tell our viewers how they can get in touch with you and your organization for any assistance with the challenges.
We have an active social media page called Actions Support Center, and you can get us there, send us your comment, anything you need, you can just put it there. If you want us to come to your community, set up the same structures, we are available. On emails, we are civilmedia3@gmail.com. And our direct WhatsApp line is 0797665803. Thank you, Lelethu.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Please don't go away. After the break, we speak to Mr. Flori for a lived experience of how he has survived as a migrant in South Africa. See you after the break. Moreni, welcome back to Conversations with Africa Unite, the show from Africa to Africans. Now, if you just joined us, we have been discussing some of the challenges that are faced by migrants while living in South Africa. And today we have Mr. Flori Chimburanga, who is from the Village of Hope and will be sharing his experience as a migrant in South Africa. Before we start, please do remember to join in on the conversation on our social media pages. We are on Instagram and Facebook as Africa Unite, and on Twitter we are Africa_Unite_ZA. Flori, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Now, can you please just give us a brief history and how you came to South Africa, where you're from, and what your story is, basically?
Okay, thank you so much. I'm from the Congo. The story, I got so many stories to tell, but because of time, I'm from the Congo. I came in South Africa in 2020, which it was not easy. The first thing was the language. It was a big problem. And another thing was integration, and there were just so many challenges. Yeah, but what I can say, the challenges, I'm sure, will differ from different person. But for me, I'm sure integration was a big problem.
Yeah.
And the language, because where we come from, we speak French, and learning French and then come to learn English, it was such a mission. I think that is the biggest challenge towards the language. Yeah.
So can you please then maybe take us back to what was the reason that you decided to come to South Africa in 2020? And I can imagine you couldn't speak English even.
Yeah.
So you came into South Africa. How did you end up here?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because I was at third year at university. That time, there were kind of a lot of conflict happening in the Congo. People know, they will tell you. We flew from there because we've been attacked at the campus, at university we were. And I just felt like it wasn't safe for me to be, because we were kind of activists with speaking about the human rights, but the regime in place, they were not favoring what we were saying.
Yeah.
That's the main reason that I left the home. But there's a lot of things that came after that. But the reason I left there, I thought about, okay, Mandela. Mandela was one of my mentors. I used to listen to Mandela. I said, okay, fine, let me just go to South Africa, because we know about human rights in South Africa. I said, this is probably could be the best place where I can find myself. Yeah.
So you ended up in South Africa, and you mentioned that one of the biggest challenges was the language.
Yes.
But besides that, what else was some of your challenges? And I can imagine not being able to speak English and, having to communicate all of that.
Yeah.
What are some of the other challenges besides that?
Yes, there were a lot of challenges also about the paper, because I came with my passport, but I do not have enough money where I can renew my passport all the time, because you have to renew your visa, and sometimes you can't speak the language, you don't know where to go. Sometimes you're running out of money, and beside that, even integration, and people could not just welcome you. They look at you like a stranger because they don't speak their language. You are not like them, and that is just something that's for me. It was the first time I left home. I said, but why people are not accepting me? Even finding a job, it was a problem. Going to all my visits, everything just like I was thinking like, but is it this South Africa that I used to know, or is something else?
Yeah.
But the challenge is quite, as I said, it different in different person. But for me, myself, it was really a big challenge. It was a big challenge because I was supposed to learn English. I was supposed to go back to university, but it was now you have to learn first English before you go into university. The challenge was like a financial integration where people they could not accept you, and it was just hard. Even to find accommodation, it was a problem because you have to sign a contract, and if you don't have a valid paper, you cannot sign a contract to get accommodation. There were just a lot of things. I'm sure the experience that I had, most of our migrants they have the same problem.
Yeah,
I think even up now it's still happening. For you to find a job is a problem. For you to get your paper in order, it's a problem. And those are the kind of challenge that we're facing on daily basis. Yes. Yeah.
So what would you say then helped you in overcoming all of that? Because now I can hear you speak English, and if you came here 3 years ago, I mean, you speak very fluent English. So what are some of the organizations and the programs that have sort of helped you to be where you are currently?
Yes, I just want to correct you. I've been here not 3 years, more than 3 years, but what I say, because I love English. I've been learning English, listening to the music and listening to people. And every time I go where people speak English, I want to listen because I wanted to learn.
Yeah.
Really what helps me is the community.
Yeah.
Because we work, I was among the refugees, from different countries where they were speaking English. And I was there with them just to listen how they speak. And I used to read, even though I couldn't read properly English, but I was making effort, just let me try, And friends, especially women, I just find myself, I had a best friend that we can speak. They always ask me questions and correct me if I make a mistake. And I think this is the kind of things help me because of the community, the friendship. And I thank God because I've learned so much since that time and then now, yes.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. And I'm sure we will try and get you back to the show again.
No problem.
Because you have a very interesting story. And
Yes.
we're very proud of you for what you've done and how you've overcome all your challenges.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Please do remember to join in on the conversation on the challenges that are faced by migrants so we can continue the chat online, even with Flori. Are you on any social media platform?
Yes, we are at Village of Hope. If you go villageofhope.co.za, you get all the information there. We work with migrants as well. People who are migrating from different places.
Okay.
We have a lot of work we do at school level, the community level, community empowerment. We do women empowerment as well, and mental health.
Okay.
If you're struggling for all these issues as migration, you are welcome to contact us, and we'll be able to speak to you and help you the way that we could.
Thank you so much. Please do get in touch with the Village of Hope. But please do remember that each week here on the show, we will be showcasing some of the various projects that migrants are involved in. And we will look at how they've successfully managed to overcome some of the challenges. We'll be visiting them on their sites and where they work, and seeing some of the actual success stories of migrants. So please do join me each and every single week as we showcase some of the lovely work that these individuals have done in South Africa and in the society in general. Do not forget to join in on our social media conversations. On Instagram and on Facebook, we are Africa Unite. On Twitter, we are Africa_Unite_ZA. Thank you so much for joining us once again. I'm Lelethu signing out. Thank you.